Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have a full review for you of the Ultimate Season Pass tank for the brand new Year of the Dragon season, the Highlander 116F3. So the Year of the Dragon season started today on the 30th of January 2024 as I'm making this video, and the Ultimate Season Pass tank is a World War II vehicle, and the level 100 Season Pass tank is an Era 2 premium medium tank in the Cold War game mode, and I'll be doing a review of that tank as soon as I finished with this review. But the Highlander 116F3 is a premium tier 10 Chinese heavy tank, and it's awarded when you purchase the Ultimate Season Pass tank, and as usual that is 6,000 gold in the store. So if you don't play World War II game mode and you just want the Cold War vehicle, just buy the regular 2,000 gold season pass and you don't have to worry with this one. But for all of you World War II players, and there are many of you out there, in today's video I'll be going over the stats of this particular video. Let's have a scroll down and have a look at the artwork that World of Tanks console have put up on the article on the website about this season. And this is the Highlander 116F3, as I've mentioned, a Chinese premium tier 10 heavy tank. And yeah, it looks kind of a lot like a 60 TP and a lot like other sort of Eastern European heavy and medium tanks. We'll have to see how much gun depression it is, how much armour it has. But what do World of Tanks console say about this vehicle? It's a 3-round autoloader, which is unique amongst the game's Chinese vehicles, and obviously that will have a pretty hefty burst damage, you'd imagine, with what looks like a 130mm caliber gun. It also says that it has good frontal armour protection, so we'll have to see just how good that is. And yeah, in heavy tank style, this vehicle is built to meet the challenges head on. So this is what the vehicle looks like. It does come with this kind of camo pattern on it, and you just apply a clear camo in the garage over it, so there isn't a sort of 3D style, it's as you see it here. Armor profile looking like it's going to be pretty strong frontally. We'll have to see how strong in today's video, but we're going to jump over now to Excel, where I've got the stats of the Highlander 116F3 here on the left. And first up, I'm going to be comparing to 3 other heavy tanks: the WZ-111 Qilin, another Chinese premium heavy tank at tier 10, and also the Soviet Object 780, another premium heavy tank at tier 10, and a Tech Tree heavy tank in the form of the Object 277, all kind of low profile heavy tanks with some decent armour and similar caliber guns. All of these have 130mm caliber guns. Then I'm going to go over into the other sheet here on Excel, and we're going to compare to 3 other autoloaders at tier 10, a premium T58 heavy tank, the T57 heavy, and the VZ55, so 2 Tech Tree autoloaders, to give you a flavour of how the Highlander holds up against single fire and against auto-loading fire in the World War II game mode. If you haven't seen my reviews before, start off with the stats. Green is the best, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between. And the ones highlighted in yellow are with the base stats and the commander and equipment setup that I've chosen to use applied to them, and how that improves the base stats. And I'll talk you through my commander and equipment setup in just a little bit. We're also going to go over here to tanks.gg, which actually has the armor profile of the 116F3. I don't think it's in the PC game mode. It looks like it is ready to be in at some point, but it's the exact same armor profile and armor layout here, so we can see just how thick the armor is. And already you can see it's all red and purple, which is pretty ominous for the 116F3. So we're going to start with the stats, and we're going to start with the XP bonus, as it is a premium vehicle, 5%. That's the same as the Qilin and the 780, and of course the 277 is a Tech Tree tank, so it doesn't have an XP bonus, but it's always nice to have a little bit of an XP bonus. And now we're going to get stuck into the raw stats of these vehicles. So the Highlander 116F3, 2,100 hit points, and as you can see, 100 worse than the other heavy tanks in this comparison. And in terms of your view range, 400 meters is pretty decent. It's the same as the WZ-111 Qilin and the 277, just 10 meters less than the 780, but very good at spotting for itself if you do use things like either the advanced optics and the situational awareness with your equipment and commander. You can get up to a very good level, minus 512 meters, and I can spot very well for myself, so that's a good plus point there. A shame about the hit points, but hopefully, as you've seen on the armor profile, that will make up for the slightly less hit points. In terms of your mobility, you can see a lot of it's highlighted in red and orange, which is bad news for the 116F3. You have an 840 engine power, which translates into a 14.48 power to weight ratio, 35 kilometers an hour forwards, 20 kilometers an hour in reverse, a 23 degrees a second hold reverse, and a 26 degrees a second turret traverse. So a decent enough engine power, but because of the weight of the armour of your vehicle, not the best power to weight, the worst in this comparison, very similar to a WZ111 Q-Lin, and unfortunately when you do get up to your top forward speed, again that is the worst in this comparison by some way. 10 kilometers an hour less than the 780, then you've got 15 kilometers an hour less than the WZ111 Q-Lin, and 20 kilometers an hour less than the Object 277. So when you get up to your top forward speed, it's not great news. It is very slow. You're a heavy tank, you're more like a super heavy tank in terms of your top forward speed. Your power to weight isn't awful, all of it is the worst in this comparison, but yeah, it's just a shame that you can't really improve that. And if you did with your mobility equipment in the garage, you are sacrificing a lot of other things about this vehicle, gun handling, DPM, etc., which I'll show you in just a little bit. In terms of the reverse speed, you do have the best reverse speed in this comparison, 5 kilometers an hour more than the other three vehicles, which have 15 kilometers an hour. So good for getting off of those ridge lines and making the most of your turret armor. And that's pretty much the only good thing about the mobility of the Highlander 116F3. As your hold traverse is pretty pathetic. That's like a super heavy tank level hold traverse, 23 degrees a second, much worse than the other vehicles in this comparison, and something like the 780 blows it out of the water. So you're going to want to think about trying to improve your hold traverse either with mobility equipment or with something like clutch braking with your Commander. In terms of your turret traverse, 26 degrees a second, not quite as bad as the hold traverse, but it's still pretty slow, and it's the worst in this comparison. You can get it up to a decent enough level with gun handling skills, and mine's got up to 31.62 degrees a second, but combining it with your poor hold traverse, people that are circling you, you are going to have trouble trying to get your gun around on target with some of the faster tanks in tiers 8, 9 and 10. Recommend you moving your hull and your turret at the same time, otherwise you're not going to be able to get your shots on those tanks that are trying to circle strafe you. So definitely pay attention to that and know that you are going to be very slow at turning and very slow with your top forward speed. The only good thing is that reverse speed. So in terms of the gun then on the Highlander 116F3, and this is where it gets pretty tasty for this vehicle, aside from the very good armour. I've already mentioned that all of these vehicles in this particular comparison have 130mm caliber guns. On the Highlander 116F3, however, you have a 3-shot autoloader, and this 3-shot autoloader has a 5-second intra-clip reload, meaning you can deal 1590 damage in 10 seconds, so a nice burst capacity over the other single fire tanks in this comparison. That's because you have 530 alpha damage on your standard AP rounds, 530 alpha damage on your premium APCR, and you have 640 alpha damage on your HE rounds. So in terms of the actual alpha damage, it's not the highest on a 130. That would go to the Q-Lin, which has 560 alpha damage, but you have more than the 130 on the Object 277 and the same as on the Object 780. You have 3 flavours of ammunition, which I've just touched upon: AP as standard, APCR as premium, and HE as your third ammunition selection. APCR is great for higher shell velocity, however it loses penetration over distance, and I would prefer something like heat rounds to be able to go through sort of thick, flat armour. However, like I've just said, APCR does have an advantage with a slightly faster round. Your standard rounds are 950 meters a second, and your APCR are 1350 meters a second, so your AP rounds you can struggle at sort of mid to long ranges if you don't give enough lead, so prepare to give it a little bit more lead than you would on something like an Object 780. However, if you want that better shell velocity, load those premium rounds, and yeah, that's pretty good for sniping at mid to long ranges. Just know you will lose penetration over distance with APCR rounds, whereas you won't with something like a heat round, and you have 930 meters a second on your HE rounds, which is pretty quick for an HE round. In terms of your penetration then, 266mm on your standard AP rounds. You can see this is better than the WZ-111 Q-Lin, just 1mm less than the 780's 267mm, and it is one more than the Object 277's 265mm, so pretty good standard penetration there on the 116 F3, just 1mm short of the highest in this comparison, the 780. Premium rounds, that jumps up to 325mm, which isn't the best at tier 10, definitely not the worst. Not as good as something like the 340mm heat rounds on the Q-Lin. However, you have more penetration than the 780, and again, not as good as the heat rounds on the Object 277. The good thing about these APCR rounds is that better shell velocity, so good for firing at mid to long ranges and actually hitting your target. You will lose penetration at that distance, and 325mm is still pretty good at mid to close range for a tier 10 vehicle. It's just not as good as something like the 340mm heat rounds on the Q-Lin and the 277 at butchering through super heavy tanks. It's enough, it could do with a little bit more, yeah, but it's definitely workable with inside tier 10 and meeting tiers 8, 9 and 10 vehicles. And lastly, in terms of your HE rounds, 65mm of pen, which is the same as the other vehicles in this comparison, for that 640 alpha damage, but you do have the best shell velocity with your HE rounds, although it's joint best with the other vehicles in this comparison, so pretty good at leading targets with the HE rounds, although I wouldn't carry too many, as of course you're an autoloader and you're going to have that clip, and it's going to be a bit awkward managing when you reload a full magazine of HE. So that's it for the stats of the alpha damage and penetration and shell velocity. How about the gun handling? Well, it's not looking like good news, is it, with the red here on the 116 F3. You have 2.9 seconds aim time, which is the worst in this comparison by a long, long way. The 780 being out there right in front at 1.9 seconds, and you are even a lot worse than the Q-Lin. In terms of your accuracy, not much better again, 0.42, the worst in this comparison, and the best is the 780 with 0.35, so you're going to want to try and improve your gun handling and your accuracy because it's looking pretty poor so far. How about the DPM, where you have a 3.6 rate of fire, you reload those 3 shells in your autoloader for 40 seconds, which means you have a DPM of 1908, and as a tier 10 vehicle that is pretty horrific. You can see here the Q-Lin is best in this comparison, out there at front at 2604. You are some way still behind the 780 and 277, but you do have that burst potential, 1590 damage in 10 seconds, as the kind of upside to the downside of this pretty poor DPM. You can improve it with things like the rapid loading in terms of your commander skills, but you haven't got the option, as it's an autoloader, to use the advanced loader as an equipment slot, so you have to invest it into something else. In terms of your ammo capacity, 42 rounds, which is the best in this comparison by 2. You have very good gun depression for a Chinese vehicle at 8 degrees, one more than on the Q-Lin and 780. And you have a lot more than the 5.5 degrees on the 277, so you're more flexible on a ridgeline. Use that 20 kilometers an hour reverse speed, great turret armor, and you should be golden. And 20 degrees of gun elevation, not as bad as the 780, which is the worst in this comparison at 15 degrees. It is better than the 277, but not quite as good as the Q-Lin's 23 degrees of gun elevation. And yeah, overall as a package, you can see here that you have pretty poor hit points. However, you do have some very tasty armor you're going to see in a little bit. 400 meters view range is more than adequate to get up to a level where you can spot for yourself. You do have poor mobility, with the only saving grace being the reverse speed. You're very slow at turning your turret hull, and your top speed is limited to 35 kilometers an hour, so very disappointing. You have that 3-shot autoloader for that nice burst damage, which is an advantage over single fire guns. Pretty high alpha damage in itself, 530 on the standard and premium and 640 on the HE. Decent enough penetration. Shell velocity is a little bit disappointing on the AP rounds, but good on the APCR. You just don't have heat to get that penetration over distance, and you don't have heat for going through that really thick armor like on the Mouse or E100 or the Type 5 Heavy. Gun handling is disappointing, 2.9 second aim time, 0.42 accuracy. is a bit of a struggle to get down to a good level when you're also trying to buff other things about the vehicle, like the hull traverse and the view range. However, it is of course a trade-off for that 3-shot autoloader, that 5-second interclip reload as we've just mentioned, a 40-second base reload, the worst DPM in this comparison, but good gun depression and good ammo capacity. I'm quickly going to show you a brief overview of what the Highlander 116F3 is like compared to 3 auto-loading tier 10 heavy tanks, and then we're going to look at my commander and equipment setup and how that affects the stats of this vehicle. So, compared to the premium American T58 heavy tank and the Tech Tree T57 heavy American tank and the Czechoslovakian VZ55. So in terms of the gun caliber of all these vehicles, the Highlander 116F3 has that 130mm caliber gun, the T58 has that big 155mm caliber gun, the T57 120mm, and the VZ55 130mm, the same as the 116F3. In terms of the XP bonus, the only comparison is the T58 Heavy, as it's a premium vehicle, same 5%. And now we can get into the stats then of these vehicles. So again, Highlander 116F3 down there at 2,100 hit points, the same as the VZ55, but not as good as tanks like the T58 and the T57 Heavy, which have 2,250 hit points. You have the joint best view range with the 2 American autoloaders in this comparison, 10 meters better than the view range on the VZ55, which is a good bonus. And here you can see, unfortunately, in terms of your mobility, it's not going to be great compared to these other vehicles. You do have a better power to weight and a similar power to weight than the T58 and the T57 Heavy respectively, but the VZ55 has the better power to weight, and of course that bad top forward speed means you are the worst in this comparison, even slightly worse than a T58 Heavy and a T57 Heavy, and the VZ55 being out in front by some way at 50 kilometers an hour. Top forward speed. In terms of your reverse speed, you have the best reverse speed by some way over the Americans and by 5 kilometers an hour more over the VZ55. But again, you have that horrific, worst in class hull traverse, worse than on the T58 and T57 Heavy, and worse than the VZ55. And in terms of your turret traverse, 4 degrees a second less than on the T58 Heavy, but you do have 1 degree a second better than on the VZ55, and that is improved with gun handling skills, so not too much to worry about there. And in terms of the hull and turret, the best in this comparison is the T57 Heavy. You can see here 32 degrees and 38 degrees a second respectively on its hull and turret traverse, so poor mobility compared to the other auto loaders. How about the gun then? We've talked about the gun caliber. What about the burst damage? 1590 damage in 10 seconds on the 116F3. On the T58 Heavy, you got 2,250 in 15 seconds. 1,600 damage in 6 seconds on the T57. And on the VZ55, 980 damage in that 2 seconds. So, interclip reload wise, you have 5 seconds on the 116F3, 7.5 seconds on the 58 Heavy, on the 57 Heavy, and on the VZ55, it's 2 seconds, giving you that burst damage in however many seconds. In terms of the shell types, then, on the Highlander 116F3, we've already discussed you have AP, APCR, and HE. That's the same as the VZ55, whereas the T58 and T57 have heat as its premium ammunition selection. In terms of alpha damages, the highest is going to go to the T58 Heavy, highest caliber gun, 750 alpha damage and 950 with its HE rounds. In terms of the other alpha damages, you have higher, of course, than the 57 Heavy, as it's a 120mm caliber gun, and you have a higher alpha damage than the 130 on the VZ55 by 40. That has 490, whereas the 116F3 has 530. In terms of penetration then, 266mm a standard pen, that's better than the VZ55, 10 less than on the standard rounds on the T58, but it is better than the T57 Heavy. And in terms of your premium, it's not the worst, that goes to 306mm on the VZ55, so you've got a plus over that vehicle. Not quite as good as the 340 heat on the T57 Heavy, and the best in this comparison, the heat rounds on that T58 Heavy, 370mm. So not the worst, but not as good as the heat rounds on the 2 Americans. And in terms of your penetration on the 8G, 65mm, slightly worse than on the BZ55, better than T57 Heavy, and of course not as good as the higher caliber T58 Heavy. So in terms of the shell velocity, then you can see here that you don't have the worst shell velocity in this comparison. That goes to the T58 Heavy with 870 meters a second. You have not quite as good as the T57 Heavy, and you have 30 less than the VZ55. In terms of your APCR rounds, they are the best shell velocity on any round of any premium round in this comparison, and the shell velocity on the HE 930 meters a second is better than on the T58 Heavy, and it's not quite as good as the T57 Heavy, but it is better than the VZ55. And lastly, in terms of gun handling then and DPM, you can see here you have the same horrific aim time as on the T58 Heavy, and that's a higher caliber gun, so that's a little bit disappointing. And you have a 0.42 accuracy, which is the worst in this comparison, even worse than the high caliber 155mm on the T58 Heavy. 3.6 rate of fire, 40-second reload with that 5-second interclip, 1908 DPM, and as you can see, this is the worst DPM by a long way. Even the VZ55 has poor DPM, but that's 2450, so much higher than the 116F3. And you can see here the T58 Heavy out here just behind the T57 Heavy, which has a 3096 DPM, which is absolutely insane for an autoloader. You can see that you do suffer in comparison to the Americans, and even worse than the Czechoslovakian VZ55. You do have 42 rounds, which is the highest amount any tank can carry. You have the joint best gun depression of all of the other tanks in this comparison, and you have the best gun elevation, 20 degrees, better than the Americans and even better than the BZ55. So, as a take-home compared to the other autoloaders, you can see here that you do have the joint worst hit points. However, you have a good view range, mobility very poor still, even compared to the T58 and T57, which aren't notoriously fast, with a special mention to the really poor hold reverse and turret reverse that holds this vehicle back. You have the third best burst amount of damage at 1590, the lowest being the two-shot autoloader on the VZ55, but you are nothing like the 58 Heavy with 2250 damage in 15 seconds, and you can't even get 1600 damage out in 6 seconds like the T57 Heavy does, but it's still a pretty hefty amount. You've got good enough shell velocity on your standard and your best-in-class premium shell velocity at 1350 meters a second. Decent penetration, of course not the best, that goes to the T58 Heavy. However, you have better penetration than on the VZ55 and also better alpha damage than that tank. In terms of gun handling, yeah, pretty horrific, isn't it? Worst in class. The only saving graces in terms of the gun handling is that you can get them down to a reasonable level. You have that burst damage, and yeah, you have the capacity to hold the most ammunition with the best gun depression and the best gun elevation. So that's it in terms of the stats compared to the autoloaders. Let's have a look at my commander and equipment setup and see what I choose to run on the Highlander 116F3. So in terms of my equipment, I choose to run the advanced optics, the advanced gun lay and drive, and the gun stabilizer. And in terms of my commander skills, 6th Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Clutch Braking, Track Mechanic, and Situational Awareness. So in terms of my equipment, what am I trying to do? Trying to boost up my view range so I can spot for myself as a heavy tank, using the advanced optics, gun lay and drive, reducing the aiming speed by 12%, and the gun stabilizer, improving my accuracy on this vehicle. As we have seen, it is the worst in comparison to the other vehicles in terms of the aim time and the accuracy. In terms of my commander skill, 6th Sense and Born Leader is standard on every one of my vehicles that I run. Rapid loading to help the loading speed and the DPM of this 3-shot autoloader. Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, 3 gun handling skills to help out the accuracy. I would like to run run and gun, but I also wanted to use these last 3 on my commander, so I run Clutch Braking to help the hold traverse, Track Mechanic to get the tracks on, as you do have a long downtime of your reload, and Situational Awareness to boost up that view range alongside the advanced optics so I can spot really well for myself. I would like to use run and gun, and if you didn't want to improve the whole traverse and you're just happy with the slow mobility of this vehicle and you didn't want to improve it by 7.5%, I'd use run and gun instead of clutch braking. Track mechanic and situational awareness, again, kind of you could switch them out to something else if you so wished. Deadeye could be something quite funny on this vehicle, as it improves critical damage, and every one of your shots in your clip you could be damaging the module again and again, and hopefully getting things like ammo racks and fires. Or you could use things like off-road driving to help the handling over different types of terrain. And of course, this is just my recommendation of how you set it up. You can tweak it to your liking, but that's what I would run, and yet see how that works for you. And if you run that same setup alongside the combat rations which I run with my consumables, you'll be looking at an increase in your view range of 112 meters to 512 meters. In terms of the whole traverse, that's improved in the mobility from 23 to 25.07 degrees a second, so not a massive increase, but every little helps with that really bad whole traverse. Turret traverse has improved quite a lot from 26 to 31.62 degrees a second, thanks to the gun handling skills. In terms of my gun handling and DPM then, aim time's dropped from 2.9 to 2.35 seconds, accuracy's gone from 0.42 to 0.34, my rate of fire's jumped up to 4.24, which means I now reload instead of 40 seconds, I reload in 32.41 seconds, with my DPM going from 1908 to 2247, which still doesn't even catch the other base values of the other tanks in this comparison, showing you just how bad that DPM is. But I found that it was the best way of setting up this vehicle, getting your view range, improving your mobility in terms of the hull and turret traverse, and then investing everything else into the DPM, the gun handling, and trying to be able to make the most of this autoloader, which looks like, alongside the armour, is one of the best things about this vehicle. So we can now skip over to tanks.gg, have a look at the armour profile of the 116F3, and this is the exact same armour profile as the tank we have in console, even though this thing isn't on PC to the best of my knowledge. And we're going to see what the armour profile of this tank is like compared to a couple of different guns. So this is what it's like compared to its own gun, its own 130mm caliber gun, with 266mm of penetration and 325mm on its APCR rounds. So as you can see on this vehicle, a very kind of low profile vehicle, or mid to low profile. You kind of have different sections here on the upper plate. You have a slanted upper plate, a very well sloped lower plate, and kind of a mid section here of different sections of armour. A very big turret from the front which protrudes out over the tracks, so hopefully that's going to see, that's a weak spot when we're side scraping. But if you're facing this vehicle from the front, you can see that it has weak spots on top of the turret in the form of cupolas, but they're absolutely tiny. Even when you're staring it in the gun, the left cupola, you need 120mm to go through, and the right, you only need around 45mm. But look how small that shot is. Even up close, it's going to be hard to hit, and when it's using its gun depression, you can't even see that weak spot. And when you're looking at it dead in the gun, to go straight through the turret, you're going to need upwards of 358 to 375mm of penetration to go through the cheeks of the turret, and towards the outer edges, it's just going to be a ricochet. In terms of the upper plate, the topmost section here, it's going to be an auto ricochet from this angle. The midsection, you need 325mm or more of penetration to go through, and the lower plate, 270mm to go through. That's not really a massive weak spot, and of course when you angle this thing up like this, it becomes incredibly strong. You now need 290mm of penetration to go through even the lower plate. And the bottom sort of lower plate, or the underneath of this vehicle, which is sloped down towards the bottom, is going to be an auto ricochet. When you're looking at it from this angle, you can only really penetrate it when it's cresting a ridgeline down there, as it's 60mm of armour. This thing has 120mm of side armour, so incredibly strong side armour on this vehicle. I did mention that turret protrudes out over the tracks, which is a weak spot when it's side scraping, so it can side scrape very, very well against all caliber of guns. However, the weak spot is this section of the turret which goes over the tracks. that is what you shoot at when it's side scraping. If you've got enough penetration, of course, you try and shoot the lower plate from the front or the cupola if you can see it. But even if you're loading the premium rounds on this vehicle at 325mm, the only thing that gets easier to go through is the lower plate. But when it's even angled like this, shooting another one with another 116 f3, you've only got around a 40% chance of going through the lower plate when it's angled, down to around a 70% chance if it's slightly less angled. And if it's using the full extent of its gun depression, as I'll show you now, and if you can't see its lower plate, look how thick that armour is on the front. You need 478mm of pen to go through, which nothing has. You have a chance of going through to the left and right of the mantlet, around 312mm of penetration needed there, and these sort of corners here that kind of look like they're joining the upper plate to the turret. However, they are tiny little sections, and you can see that you can't even see the cupola at this angle, which is absolutely ridiculous. This is the 116 F3's armour compared to the IS-3, so the Soviet tech tree Tier 8 tank with 225mm of pen on its standard AP and 265mm on its premium. This is what it looks like when you're fighting a 116 F3 with a Tier 8 vehicle with its standard pen. Yeah, only really the cupolas you can go through. You can't even go through the lower plate. It's just a 1% chance, and that's even when it's not angled. You can still hit that side weak spot when it's angling, and of course from the side you can still pen. However, what the hell are you meant to do? If you load your gold rounds, the lower plate doesn't even go up by much, does it? It gives you an 18% chance with your gold rounds on the IS-3 to be able to go through. And again, you just got to go for the cupolas or get around the side or shoot that side weak spot when it is side scraping. And of course, when it's using its gun depression, it'll be even worse. How about when it's fighting the Jagdpanzer E100? So the Jagdpanzer E100 has a 170mm caliber gun, and it has 299mm of standard AP round and 420mm of heat round. So again, look how strong it is even against the standard rounds of the Jagdpanzer E100. The only thing that is the weak spot is this lower plate and kind of mid section here. With the Jagdpanzer E100, you can go through about 90% chance of this section, but even the turret, you're not going to be able to go through with the standard rounds of the Jagdpanzer E100. The only difference is that the roof deck of the 116 F3 is 55mm, and you need a 166mm caliber gun or higher to overmatch. So Death Star and Jagdpanzer E100 can overmatch this section of the vehicle, which is a good plus point to having a high caliber gun like on the Jagdpanzer E100. But yeah, look how thick this turret is. You just cannot go through it. Again, slight chance when it's using its gun depression of going through the cheeks. They become a bit weak, and you can go through with the standard rounds of Tier 10 tank destroyers a little bit easier, but you can't see the cupola. And yeah, again, you've just got to shoot the lower plate, and if it exposes its mid plate here, you can go through with around a 50% chance. How about if you load the heat rounds then on the Jagdpanzer E100? Again, it becomes a little bit easier, of course. You can go through the whole lower and mid sections, and you can go through the cheeks of the turret, and about a 90% success rate. But again, look how good this armour is. It's absolutely insane. You can catch these sections here that protrude out again with higher penetration, but when it's side scraping, it's easier to hit. And it's just an absolutely insane vehicle. You can't go through the upper plate with 420mm heat rounds, which shows you just how good the armour is on this vehicle. And if it's side scraping against you with this kind of penetration, then of course you'll be able to go through. But yeah, it's a very, very strong vehicle indeed. On a ridgeline, even if you're firing the best kind of premium rounds you can get at Tier 10, you can only go through the cheeks around 90% of the time, and with less penetration on the other Tier 10 tank destroyers, on things like a Grill 15 you're going to struggle, and you're even going to bounce with premium heat rounds like on the other Soviet Tier 10 tank destroyers. It just shows you how good the armour is on this vehicle. So yeah, incredibly well armoured. Lower plate is not really a weak spot. Frontally, you need 265mm of penetration when it's not angling, and when it's angling, yeah, you need around 360mm or more to go through. Hold down, you can't see the cupolas. You can only really go through the lower and mid sections of this vehicle, and with the cheeks, if you have enough penetration, around 300mm of penetration. Side scraping, it can do that very well, but just be wary of people shooting this section here that protrudes out from around the tracks. Side on, it's a nice easy sort of penetration. The turret, you still need around 200mm to go through, the side 125 and the rear 60mm, and the rear of the turret 60mm of pen in order to be able to go through. You can track and pen from the rear and from the front, so that's good to know when it comes around the corner. But yeah, this thing is an absolute monster on the battlefield in terms of its armour, and one of its biggest assets. And yeah, the weak spots are very hard to hit, and you can only overmatch with 166mm caliber gun or higher. So that's it for the stats of the Highlander 116F3. We've looked at my commander and equipment setup, we've compared it to single fire and auto-loading guns, and looked at the armour profile on tanks.gg. We're now going to head on into the first of the gameplays of today's video, so I'll see you in the first gameplay in just a second. So we are now into the first gameplay of today's video, and we are here on Sunset Coast in the 116F3. It's already a minute into this battle, as this thing is so slow getting into position, and you'll have a chance to see how slow this thing is in this gameplay and the three that follow. We peek around this rock here to the left, try and maximise our hull and lower plate armour. We ricochet a shell from the T58 Heavy, which we compared this tank to in the stats part of today's video, and we put one into the side of that American auto-loading premium heavy tank. And yeah, over 500 damage is nice to chunk down your opponents, and that is a low roll. So we're going to be pretty aggressive here. We've got an Avery in front of us. We are very dangerous ourselves. I think I heard the T58 fire, so I'm going to go around, put one into the lower plate, and then he is now pretty much a one-shot almost all of the time there, unless we roll dramatically low. We have those two shells we kept to put into that T58 Heavy should he poke round again. We managed to take him out, and then I noticed that the enemy team are pushing down south towards our base, so I'm going to be heading back there, seeing if we can get some sneaky shots through the centre of this map at any stragglers of the enemy team that are making their way a little bit too slowly, or who are camping their spawn. So you can see the long aim time here of the Highlander 116F3. We do manage to get a shell there. It just takes so long to aim in after you've stopped moving. Run and gun would definitely help if I added that as well, but there are so many things to improve about this vehicle that you really do have to pick and choose what you do with your commander and equipment setup. If you do let it aim in, for the most part they go in. It still has the tendency to derp 1 out of the 3 shells, but that's just the trade-off that you make for the pretty damn good armour that this heavy tank has. And then we're on this massive reload again, and even though I've got mine down to 32.41 seconds, it's still a long old reload for those 3 shells. And when you do get to use those shells, it doesn't take too many magazines to be able to do a nice lot of damage. We angle up and we bounce off an enemy Highlander, and we're going to try and bait one more shell from him now. We're going to consider him poking and shooting there, but he's angled up as well, and with our standard AP rounds, it will be a very low chance of us going through that mid to lower plate there on the Highlander. So I'm just going to wait here, see if we can catch him out of position, see if he gets distracted, and then we can poke round and put some shells into someone else. He's kind of reloading, I'm expected behind that rock, so we're going to poke round. We get one into the IS two there, and we're going to wait those 5-second interclip reload. It can feel quite long, so sometimes you are kind of you have that feeling that you really want to just sit there and get the next shell out, but sometimes it is just worth pulling back, using that good reverse speed, and yeah, avoiding taking any fire. You have to kind of manage the interclip quite nicely with this long reload, and it takes a little bit of skill to do so. You can sort of just sit back, ambush a tank, but that interclip reload can catch you out. It can make you feel like you just want to sit in front of your enemy because you are kind of always nearly reloaded. However, it can be your downfall in some games. You're going to see here the horrific derpiness of the gun there, as we do miss a shell there on that Lorraine 15551. However, our second one damages his gun as he fires, and a nice roll there, and for some reason we managed not to overmatch there the Udezo-3. I think we just hit the tracks, the one place that we wouldn't have done damage. And now we are getting targeted by artillery, however, because of the armour on the front of this thing, didn't take too much splash. And now we're going to see if we can get any more damage in this game, and this is where you can see how slow this vehicle is. This was one of the first games I had in the 116F3, and it's very indicative of a kind of standard game that you can have in this heavy tank. When you're in front of the opposition and you have the chance to reload, they're not going to all-in you when you're reloading, and you can manage your interclip reload. You can bounce a shell, then put all 3 into someone, or even just the 2. And yeah, you do chunk them down massively. It's just this reload and the mobility that holds this tank back. And here, we probably would have been able to get 1 or 2 more shots in if we were in any other sort of the faster tanks that we compared this tank to in the stats part of today's video. Any other faster heavy would have been able probably to get a shot into that Chrysler K or 15551. However, we still finished with a decent result there. We didn't even finish on the leaderboard there, or the top 3. That was just a very standard game there to start off today's video in the 116F3. Made a profit with a premium account, lost without. That's because we did fire some premium, I believe, in that game, and we do use combat rations and large med, large repair kit. 2 kills, 4.2k direct damage, and we do block 1520, showing you the armour is very effective there in a 5 minutes and 34 second battle. So that's it for the first gameplay. We are now going to head on into the second one. So now we are into the second gameplay of today's video, and we're here right at the start of this battle on Serene Coast. We've spawned in the north, and I'm going to make my way down the west and protect our flank, as most of our team are going to be going towards the encounter capture circle, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't get flanked from behind, because yeah, the opposite is going to happen to the enemy team in this particular gameplay. So I'm trying to ask for a little bit of help. I need, 3 to 4 tanks to come with me, or just protect me in case they crest this ridgeline, and we're going to try and make our way as quickly as this tank will allow to try and use these ridgelines. And this is kind of the perfect scenario for the 116F3. We have a lovely ridgeline. We can use the 8 degrees of gun depression. We can fall back with the 20 kilometers an hour, and we can ricochet tanks off of our very, very strong upper hull, and more importantly, our turret. I've picked the steepest part of the ridge there, so I'm going to reverse up and go a little bit further down so I can actually get shots on the Highlander beneath me. Thinking about snapping a shot there into the IS-22 there, or whatever it was at the back. However, I've decided to go for this Highlander. We have loaded up the APCR rounds at the start of this battle, and that's because I looked at the team's sheet and I saw that there was Highlanders on the enemy team, but also some other heavy tanks that I would have struggled to pen frontally reliably, and I wanted to make sure that my rounds go in. We dump our magazine there into that enemy Highlander. We do take 1 in return from something at the back that goes through our turret, I believe, but we do 1694 damage, and now that Highlander is a one-shot for me. Either this T30 that's next to us, or the Type 4, who does finish him off there, and we can poke over. And whilst we are reloading, or nearly finished loading, I'm just going to peek, see if we can spot anyone towards the back, and this is where improving your view range really does help with this vehicle. You're not going to be out spotting light tanks and tank destroyers, but you definitely can get some nice spotting for your team when you get onto a ridgeline like this. And if someone fires, if some heavy tank or medium tank fires, there's a good chance I'll spot them here from this position. I'm being targeted, so I'm a little bit wary of where I'm getting targeted from. Batchat gets spotted to my left, and I'm almost certain there's going to be tank destroyers back there. There are 5 on the enemy team, and I'm a little bit wary, but as soon as I feel like I can make a push and that Batchat's behind a ridgeline, I'm going to go down into the dip, go a bit further forwards, get into another hold down location, and then see if we can progress the battle. If we get caught out here, it's a little bit unfortunate because of our mobility. It's not so much the engine power and the top forward speed, although they are pretty bad. What really makes this tank quite poor, in my opinion, in some scenarios, is the hull traverse. And of course, you want to keep the frontal part of your tank towards your enemy because it's the strongest part. And as soon as people get your sides, you can get taken out very quickly. I found from my experience in my play session today in this vehicle that, yeah, this reload and the interclip reload are the only things that really sort of invite people to come after you. People are very scared of this vehicle already because of the armour, and as they should be wary. But I think it's actually quite an easy tank to counter. If you have good penetration, you can go through that kind of lower plate, mid plate, and if you just are patient, you can get round the side or just go at it when it is reloading. So it's not completely sort of broken or overpowered like it looked like it might be on paper. It can be countered. It's very strong, but I wouldn't say it's the best tank in the game. There's going to be some fantastic replays in this tank because of how powerful the armour is, but for the most part, for most of the player base, you're going to have solid results, but you're still going to be able to take it out. So I think it's not too bad for the game. It's just going to be a lot for the most part at the moment, thanks to the fact that it is an Ultimate Season Pass tank. So I'm trying to talk and waffle as much as possible because you can see this reload is extremely long. I'm going to go for the turret ring there, which sticks out underneath the turret. We managed to get one into that enemy Highlander here. We're going to wait and try and aim in as long as possible, rock backwards and forwards in between our shots so that the enemy Highlander can't shoot our cupolas on top. Unfortunately, we do bounce the next 2 rounds and I'm still loading the APCR. You can see at the bottom that I do have 2 HE rounds loaded, and it's just because I completely forgot this is a 3-shot autoloader when I set up the ammunition, and this is what you're going to see for the rest of the gameplay and the one previously. However, don't do it like I did. Make sure there's a full clip of every single ammunition. But yeah, you're going to be hard pressed to find a game where you're going to be so deep into your magazine that you're going to be worrying about running out of ammunition. And if you do, you've probably done over 10,000 damage. Just going to wait for the enemy Highlander to turn his turret, and that's what you want to do with this vehicle. If it is hold down and you can't see its lower plate or mid plate, wait for it to turn its turret, and it's much easier than trying to shoot the cupolas. And now we can advance on this tank destroyer and maybe get some flanking shots in all of those heavy tanks that are in the encounter capture circle. We are up by 5 tanks, so I want to try and make the most of this situation where we have managed to now flank them, and now they are at risk of me getting shots into the rear. I went for a reload a bit late there. I should have chosen to reload a bit earlier, and that is going to cost us, or potentially cost us, the chance to get some shells hit into these heavy tanks that are all situated over there on the eastern side. I'm going to make my way down this gap here, see if we can get a shot to the tank destroyer, to the T124 to our right, and if not, we're going to poke around the rock to our left and see if we can get some more shots that way as well. Just going to be a little bit careful. You can see here the hull traverse isn't great. It takes a lot to turn this vehicle, so I'm just going to risk it. There's a bit of a hill there anyway, and this is how slow it is on this kind of soft terrain to turn the 116 F3 around. We have got the clutch brake in. If I use the traction system, it'll be a little bit more smooth turning. However, it's still a little bit of a struggle. We get the killing shot there on the Foch 155. And now we're going to see if we can get a shot into one of these tanks. The 268 version 5 is backing up just enough gun depression with 8 degrees there to get a shot into that 268 version 5. Trying to kind of bait him to shoot off of my turret here. I didn't want to go right over because even though your armour is fantastic, good penetration and good premium penetration, especially from tier 9 and 10 tanks, is going to mean that they are very likely to go through you. So we're going to turn around, and we did that just in time because I had a feeling the E4 might be coming our way. We get one into his lower plate, and now we're in an awkward situation where we're on a reload and we're just going to have to try and bounce this T110 E4, just trying to face hug, trying to get him to shoot into the front of my turret. It looks like he just went straight through there, not sure where exactly he went through. I'm trying to angle now slightly to make the upper hull even better, and in reality, at the start, I should have just tried to get around him and make it hard for him to reverse up against a rock. I was thinking now of going forward and going around him, but fortunately, we are saved by the Ruthless, who ammo-wrecks that T110 E4. And you can see there that our kind of engine power, top forward speed, kind of hindered us there, and our hull traverse, meaning that an E4 was face-hugging us and we weren't really able to escape. So you do need to think about those kinds of situations when you're up close and personal and where the tanks are going to try and get around you, or they're going to face hug you. Just think about your positioning and make sure you have exit routes, and make sure you know what you're going to do if someone comes and kind of face hugs you, how you're going to angle your tank up. You can obviously wave your gun in front of their gun, try and get them to bait their shot into your gun. That will stop them shooting into your sort of turret ring or down on your upper hull or into one of your cupolas. There's 2 heavy tanks left. You can see here that we have blocked 4.1k damage, showing you the armor is fantastic on this thing. 4.6k direct damage, 543 assistance, 2 kills, and yeah, the mobility here is meaning that we're not able to get anything out of the rest of the game, and that's what I've been finding in most of the games with this tank. So we finished in second place there with a loss with and without a premium account. We did fire a lot of premium there, and sometimes you do need it to fight some of those thicker armoured tanks frontally, but we still had a good game, and I don't mind losing 10,000 silver with a premium account. 8 minutes 14 seconds battle. The longer the battle, the more chance you have of getting those magazines in. So that's it for that game there on Serene Coast. Now we're going to head on into the third gameplay of today's video. So now we are on Siegfried line in the Highlander 116F3, and we are 2 minutes into this battle. We get a shot there into the side of the WZ111GFT, and now we're going to see if we can hit the lower plate of this IS-4. Unfortunately we don't, but we're going to aim up in this little gap here, and when you do let it aim in, more often than not it'll go in. It's usually, 1 in 3, 1 in 6 shells will just derp somewhere randomly, even if you were aimed in. We have lost some health to the Centurion Avery, who is out in the field. I'm trying to ping him there in case we take any more splash damage. Trying to get this reload in as quick as possible, but of course there's nothing you can do about the time it takes. You just got to wait. We have hard cover behind us, and of course if they did push us in this position, we would be baiting them into stupidity, and they'd be taken out by all of the tanks, hopefully, that are behind and to the right of me. Not trying to block this 50B here, and we're just trying to find an opportunity to be able to put these magazines in, and this gameplay is the perfect example of what happens when you don't kind of push the tempo in this tank and you try and make those magazines count when you can't get them in succession, when you've got to wait a bit, when it's more drawn out and there's not a position for you on the map to be able to get your fire in. You're going to see here that we're not able to do enough in this tank because of the poor DPM and mobility, and yeah, it's going to be a bit of a tricky finish. However, we do manage to get 2 into that Avery there. He derps 1 into the ground, which allows us to get up here, aim it in as long as possible, try and get our 3rd shell into the Centurion Avery, and that takes us to 2.7k damage. So yeah, it doesn't take too long to pick up the damage. You just got to find the positions to be able to do it. I'm going to sit in this position here, keep vision on this Centurion Avery. As you can see from the rings on the minimap, we've got more than enough view range to be able to outspot this Avery, because the Centurion Avery has terrible view range, and hopefully we're going to get some assistance for it. Even if we didn't, we're still keeping him lit for our team. We get a shot there from the enemy object 277 who comes after us. He bounces off us once. We couldn't turn the hole in time because of the hole traverse, so we do take a shot, but we get 2 shots into him, and with the 3rd we should be able to take him out, and he is taken out. Now we have the WZ111 GFT coming after us. Fortunately he didn't fire at us, and he bounces straight off of us there, and I'm just trying to wiggle my gun in his face in case he tries to shoot us again, but he's now distracted by the other Highlander who's come round and who's doing a good job of putting shells into him. We're going to try and nudge and track that WZ111 GFT, however there was no need. Highlander takes him out. We're down by 2 tanks, and our reload has just gone back in. And now we're going to see if we can push around with this friendly Highlander at the tanks that are in the centre of the map. And I probably should have gone into the town at the start of this gameplay. However, I took some damage off the Centurion Avery in the field, was a little bit wary of being flanked, so I kind of stayed in that position. And the centre has kind of fallen, as you can see. Now we're outnumbered by a ratio of 2 to 1. A little bit scared of something shooting us from straight ahead of us, but it doesn't look like there's anything there. Our friendly Highlander takes out the T-54. There is a Highlander on the enemy team who is on 1,200 hit points. The only problem is if I crest that ridgeline now, I'm going to be exposing my lower play and mid play, and that's going to be an easy pen for that enemy Highlander. So I didn't really want to let anyone know that I was here. In fact, I'm going to leave this position for our friendly 116F3, and we're going to try and flank around. Up top we have a medium in the field. We're proximity detecting the tanks above us, and we have to note that there is a Turan in the distance. And yeah, high tier tank destroyers are, the bane of this tank's existence. We're going to wait for this 279E to go downslope, so we have the ability to penetrate with our premium rams on this 279E. We're going to angle up. Unfortunately there we just hit into the tracks. He puts one into our mid plate there, but we do return fire. We are now dry, and if he pushed us, we would have been dead, but fortunately our UDS-16 saves us, and now we are letting our teammates know our reload, and we're going to try and plan our next course of attack. We have pulled the team results back here, as you can see. It's now 4 versus 4, and I'm just a little bit wary in this scenario of that Turan that's in the distance, but I do want to see if I can poke up here and get any side shots into either of these Highlanders in the centre, ping him to let people know that there is that Turan there in the distance. We are getting targeted, and it's definitely not from that Highlander, it's this Turan. We try and angle as best as possible, but the Turan's got great pen and is able to go through us there. We get one shot into him. Unfortunately, we didn't able to get our last magazine out, but we still put in a decent amount of damage there. Could have made plays a bit earlier, and now we're going to see how the rest of our team can deal with these two tanks. Unfortunately, it's going to be a while, so I'm going to skip forward to the end and we're going to see what the result of this game is. Unfortunately for us, our team don't manage to take that one down, but we still finish with a good result. Sniper medal, 3rd class, 3rd on our team, 766 base XP on a defeat, 1 kill, 5.7k direct damage, and 557 assistance with 2.4k blocked, perfectly showing you what this tank is capable of in a slightly more drawn out battle of 10 minutes. And that's it for the 3rd gameplay there. We're now going to head on into the 4th and final gameplay of today's video. So you're joining me 1 minute into this battle here on Erlenberg. It's the 4th and final battle of today's video, and we are making our way over here into this position in D9. See if we can brawl it out with the heavy tanks on this corner and maybe get some shots at the tank destroyers that have just been spotted there down in the F9, F0 location. We took a massive shell making our way into position from any number of tank destroyers down there, and that was due to the poor mobility. However, we are now in position. We can use the 8 degrees of gun depression, and we can see if we can get some vision for our team that are situated back on the ridgelines in the 2-3 location and the tanks that are in the centre of the map. We've picked up 1 shot on that Turan and 734 assistance. We have to be a little bit careful as we have lost around half of our health. However, we do have a whole host of tanks behind and to the left of me that are going to be supporting us in this position. We're going to see if we can get a shot through the gap in this building on this enemy Highlander, and we managed to get one into the back of his turret as his turret's turned sideways. That shows you how big this turret actually is, and we set him on fire with our 2nd shell, but he does put that one out, and then we get a 3rd shell out there, taking us to 2.2k direct damage, 734 assistance. So this position can be a very good position for pushing at the start of the battle, but you do need a good number of tanks to push with you, and it does help when there aren't any artillery in the battle, like there aren't any artillery in this particular battle. We're down by 5 tanks, so we do have to be a little bit careful. Just baiting this Highlander, he's coming after us, but we get the spotting assistance there, and our Leopard 1 takes him out. And now we're going to see if we can just poke up this FE 4005, and now there's a 114 SP2. They keep getting spotted at the back, so I do have to be careful when I crest this ridgeline. If I crest the ridgeline, I'm going to give up my lower plate and mid plate, and it'd be an easy penetration for anyone on the enemy team. We unfortunately do take a shot there from the 114 SP2, even though we were angled, but that allows us to get all 3 of our rounds into the side and rear of that vehicle and take out the 114 SP2, and now we're up to 3.7k direct damage, but we are now a one shot for a lot of tanks on the enemy team. We're down by 2 tanks, so we do have to play it quite patient here, and this is the kind of gameplay that suits the 116 F3 really well. On a ridgeline, you're pretty much impenetrable when you are hull down using your 8 degrees of gun depression, and it's just your turret showing, so we can peek up, get some vision. We're pretty safe here. If anyone pushes us, they're either going to take us out and get themselves killed in the process, or they're going to get killed before they even make their way to us. Going to come and see if we can help the Type 5. However, the Murat is now turning away and running away. Unfortunately, he had a fire extinguisher there as the Type 5 set him on fire. And now we're just going to see if anyone crests the ridgeline to our left and see if we can spot the FE 4005. That was situated over there where he is now spotted in the F0 location. I'm still very wary of tank destroyers that are in the distance. I'll try and pop up with auto aim to get a shot through the hay bale, but I think it derps into the ground. And now this Marat's coming after us. He gets shut down by the CC-1 Mark 1, and now the Emil 2's thinking about it, but he takes a massive shell from someone in the centre. And yeah, we're just trying to create a slight little crossfire here. We have the Type 5 and the 2 tank destroyers to my left, slightly behind us, and then I have me at this angle. See if we can spot the tank destroyers that are straight in front of us, and we're also a little bit of a crossfire. If anyone pokes up to that building to our left, we can get some shots in. I'm keeping the 2 shells at the moment, just seeing who is around. We're down by 2 tanks, but we're in a pretty good situation. The FE4005 gets spotted. We put one into him, and I'm just going to keep the shell to see if we can get one more shell before we go for the reload. He is going away, so we're going to go for the reload whilst we are in a safe location, so we have 3 shells for our next engagement. And yeah, these longer drawn out battles where it's more tactical does suit this tank very nicely. You can get on a ridge, get your shots out, pull back, hide behind cover, use your teammates, and then rinse and repeat. And you definitely can bait people into shooting your turret and your upper hull and bounce quite a lot of damage. We've picked up 4.2k direct damage in this battle and 1300 assistance so far, and now we're just waiting for the right opportunity to be able to push forward and hopefully get some more spotting and some damage on the tank destroyers that are straight in front of us. I'm still very wary of poking up too far, because if we get caught out by a tank destroyer who's going to outspot us, it doesn't take much for them to take us out, as we are now on a one shot. If I had maybe 1,000 hit points back that I could have had at the start of the battle, it would be nice to maybe push forwards a bit and push the tempo of this battle, but I want to be patient. It's been a good game so far, I don't want to throw it away, and I'm just going to stay calm and see if any of the tanks down south push up, and that will allow me to push up in turn. It can be a little bit boring playing this kind of play style. I don't feel like I can be any more aggressive than I'm being already. Our friendly Type 5 Heavy takes out the Highlander on the enemy team, and I'm just asking for a little bit of help from the Italian tank destroyer behind us, see if they can use some of their hit points to push up, get some vision, and yeah, when we know where these tank destroyers are, we can then maneuver forwards. We've got a couple of good players on our team in a platoon that I know from being around the game for a while, so I know we got some good players on our team, and I want to be part of turning this battle into a victory for our team. Our Leopard 1 takes out the Waffenträger of Panzer 4, Type 5 Heavies going forwards. So now I think it's our time to make our way cautiously forward with this Type 5. I'm going to use the building as cover in front of me, just in case we get spotted. The Turan in the distance gets spotted. I'm going to aim for as long as I feel is possible, and we get a nice shot there into that Turan with that nice shell velocity on the premium APCR, helping us lead that shot. And it didn't really matter about the penetration drop-off, as we are firing at the Turan, which has paper for armour. The FE4005 gets taken out, and now this is the time when it snowballs in this game, and this is when it's nice to have a fully loaded autoloader. One into the MX M454-2, and we get the kill on that heavy tank, and now it's just the Peugeot 65 and the last remaining tank destroyer, which is the Waffenträger Panzer 4. I believe he's on full health, but he's not going to last long. As soon as he gets lit up, he is going to be absolutely wrecked by everyone remaining on our team, and he lasted all of 5 seconds there as we pick up the victory here on Erlenberg, playing quite a patient one there, but showing you the strengths of this vehicle. And we finish in 3rd place on our team there. Profit with about a premium account, 3 kills, 3rd class mastery, 1400 base XP, 5.7k direct damage, 1311 assistance. In that one we didn't block any damage, but you've seen how good the armour is on that vehicle. This was more about the gun and about getting into position and allowing yourself to get those reloads in and shell management and picking the right shell for the job. So 8 minutes 13 seconds there, 7k combined game on Erlenberg. That's the best game I've had so far. People are going to be having spectacular games in this tank. It's definitely got the capacity with the armour and the autoloader to carry games, but you have to have your wits about you with your positioning and tanks coming after you when they know that you are reloading. But yeah, make the most of your armour, get hull down where as possible, and just ambush tanks with the autoloader. Just be wary, it's a 5-second intra-click reload, which can feel like a long time. But if you want my opinion on whether it's worth it, I think that most season passes are worth it now, and for 6,000 gold, this is a very, very competitive tank. It might not be everyone's taste because of the mobility, but if you like heavy tanks and you played World War II, I think it is worth it. So that's it for my review on the Highlander 116F3. Thank you all so much for your support, and I'll get a review out of the level 100 season pass reward, the Cold War Era 2 Eastern Alliance medium tank, as soon as possible. And until then, I hope you enjoy the new season, have fun, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.